Today's daf we're going to be learning is Ketubot, daf tzadichet. We're going to start at the very top on line number 2. Moadim l'simcha to everyone. We're going to start with hahi itita. So there was a woman, we're going to have a case, and this connects with the machloket we saw in the Mishna yesterday. We had a machloket about whether if a woman demands part of her ketuba money, does that mean that she already can't demand mizono, food payments anymore, or only when she gets to the end of it? Okay, so now we're going to see, starting with the story. So there was a woman, she took from the inheritance of her husband, she took a goblet, a silver goblet, in place of part of her ketuba money. Kataba mezone. Then she went to ask the children for food payments. So they came in front of Rava. Amar lehu, he said to the Yitomim, Zilu havala mezonot, you have to give her mezonot. Delay lachash lahada Rabbi Shimon, because in the end, they actually don't hold. Nobody. Late tachash means nobody really is concerned with what Rabbi Shimon says. Right? Who said that miktzat kesef is like kol kesef, part of the payment means it's like the whole payment. In which case, right, we don't say it's like the whole payment, and therefore you still get mizonot. Shalach Rabba berei de Rabba le Rav Yosef. So Rabba, now the son of Rabba, asked the question of Rav Yosef. Mochechet shelo bebetin, tzricha shvua o en tzricha shvua. The structure is going to be, he's going to ask a question. Rav Yosef is going to counter him with another question, really more like, why didn't you ask me that question? And then we're not going to actually end up with we're going to say, he's going to explain why he didn't ask that other question, because it was obvious to him, to which they're going to say, it's actually not really obvious. And then we're going to end up with no answer to either question. And then the Gemara is going to just tell us at the end, oh, well, by the way, this is the halacha. So that's the structure. So the question is the following. If she sells, mocheret shelo bebeitin, she sold her stuff not in the court, okay? Tzricha shvua or en tzricha shvua, meaning she took the husband's property and sold it. The question is, right, in order to pay her back for whether it's her ketuba money, for her mizonot, okay, probably her ketuba money more so. So now you'll see why in a minute. So the question is, does she need to swear or does she not need to swear? So what kind of swear are we talking about? Big machloket. Rashi says she needs to swear shelo gavta yotel. Second line in Rashi, swear that she didn't take more than what she was deserving of, meaning her ketuba was X and she only took X. She didn't take X plus 1. Another option is that maybe she had to swear that she sold it for the going price and that she didn't sell it. Right? She could theoretically take a plot of land, sell it for 200 zuz. Let's say her ketuba was 200 zuz. She gets the 200 zuz, but it actually was property that was worth 250 zuz, and she just sold it for a very low price because it's much easier for her to do that than to try to find a better price. So maybe she has to swear that she did the best she could to get the best price she could. So now that's his question. To which Rav Yosef answers, why didn't you ask? Does she need to announce that she's selling this land? The whole thing about announcing land, you announce, and that way people come, and that way you have a lot of sellers, you have like a big open house, everybody comes, and that way a lot of buyers, and then you get a reasonable price, because if you just kind of go to your neighbor and say, oh, listen, I'll sell it to you pretty quick, you could get a very low price. But if you start announcing it and then there's demand, then it's going to raise your price, or at least give you a reasonable price and ensure that you're getting the price you're deserving of. So he says, why don't you ask that question? Because especially if the concern is that she's getting a good price, then you should ask the same thing about hachraza. So Amalei, Rabbi says back to him, hachraza lo k'mevayle. I didn't need to ask about that. To Amar Rabbi Zera, Amar Rav Nachman, because Rabbi Zera said in the name of Rav Nachman, almana sheshama la'atzma. Different case. Let's say a widow comes and she evaluates the land herself and says, I think this land is worth 200 zuz. That's for my ketuba. I'm going to take it for myself. Lo astava lo klum. That is a totally worthless transaction. So hechidami, what's the case? Ida achuz, if she announced and got the going rate and all these people wanted to buy it and it was clear it's worth 200 zuz and she takes that in place for ketuba, amai lo astava lo klum, that should work just fine. It must be she didn't announce. Okay, so then what? Well, what does it say? If she did it, evaluated it for herself, it doesn't work. But then theoretically, it would work if it were she sold to somebody else. And then, mashasta sta, even though there was no announcement. So what do you see? It sounds like you don't need an announcement if you sell it to somebody else. To which they reject this and they say, no, you can't learn it from there. It's not obvious from there because you could actually explain that case differently. And then it has nothing to do with our case. L'olam de'achuz, she did announce it. And why doesn't it count? Man shamlich. Because he can say to her, who are you to have evaluated this? Okay, we don't exactly understand this yet, but we're going to see another case right now, and then we'll understand it better. There was a person who the Yatomim, the orphans, asked him to watch for them. Okay, either kistadiatme, which is fodder for right, he's watching this pile of fodder for the animal, for the orphans that they owned, or it could be, which is actually more likely when we get to the amount, you'll see why, could be kasita, which is coral. So he was watching, let's just assume it's coral. He was watching coral for these orphans, but he actually was owed also money by the father. So Azal Shama Lenafshe Ba'arba Me'azuzim. He evaluated that it was worth 400 zuz. And he said, okay, I'm owed 400 zuz. I'll take this coral that I'm watching of your stuff, and I'm owed it anyway. I'm going to keep it for myself. Iyakil. Then what happened? The price of coral went up. Kam b'shitmeh, and the whole batch that he had was actually now worth 600 zuz. So the Yatomim came and said, listen, you have to pass back 200 zuz. And he says, what are you talking about? I took this when it was worth 400. And you can see why it becomes complicated. There's no actual moment of sale, right? So now, Ata the Kamed Rabbi Ami, he came before Rabbi Ami, he wanted to say, let me keep my coral. Amar le, man shamlach, he said, who told you you could do this? Meaning you didn't do this in court, you didn't do it formally in any official kind of way. It doesn't work. You can't just do that. You can't just say, oh, I'm taking this and keeping it for myself. Because again, values change, prices fluctuate, and it's going to be very complicated when there's no actual act of sale. So it's the same way with the woman. That's why she can't. That's why in that case, even if she had announced it, it doesn't really matter. Because when she takes it for herself, she's just kind of saying, oh, this property that's right here, this is mine. Who knows exactly what it's evaluated at that moment. The Hilchatab, and now as I told you, so now that basically, again, he was asked a question. Rav Yosef countered and said, well, why didn't you ask this question? Rava tried to say, well, he didn't ask that question, but in the end, we say, well, you still should have asked that question. And in the end, the Gemara says, Hilchata, the halacha is tzricha shvua ve'ena tzricha achraza. She needs to swear, and she doesn't need to announce them. Okay, next. Almana shayta ketubata matayim umachra shaveh maneh b'matayim. She had a ketuba of 200, and then she sold the field that was worth 100. She was a very good real estate agent, and she sold it for 200. Okay, so she managed to get double the value. Now, her ketuba is 200. So, but the land she sold was 100. She got 200 for it, so she got the cash. But question is, right, whose lot can she say I only took 100 because I took land that was 100? And the Yatomim kind of went out in this case because she only ended up taking 100 from them and not something worth 200. So we'll see who's in the right here, or who gets the profit. Okay, this is a different case. It's the opposite. She sold the field that was worth 100, but field that was worth 200, she sold for 100. She only got half the value. She was terrible. So nit kabla ktubata. She's done. That's it. That's all she has to do with the Yatomim. She got her ketuba in the first case. She got her ketuba in the second case. In the first case, all the profit she gained, she didn't really gain. In other words, now she just has her whole amount of the ketuba, but that's it. And in the second case, she loses out because she sold it for way less than it was worth. Her ketuba was 100. She sold the field. She took more than what she was granted, 100 and a dinar, one more dinar, right? A maneh is 100 dinarim. And she sold it for 100. Okay, so it sounds like she sold it for less than what it was worth. Michra batel. Her sale is canceled. Why is it canceled? Because it's not just that she sold it for less than it's worth, but it's also that she took more land than what she was deserving of. She could only have access to a maneh. She didn't have access to that extra dinar. So basically, it's canceled. We're going to get into this a little bit more at the end of today's talk. Afilu hi omeret, even if she says, achzir dinar liyorshim, I'll give that dinar back to the yorshim, or I'll give a dinar back to them to replace it, still nichra batel. It's still no good because she took more than she was deserving of. Rashbag, and that she never had rights to sell it in the first place. It wasn't hers. Rashbag omer le'olam nichra kayam. He disagrees, says, sale's a valid sale, ad shtesham kadesh teshayer b'sadeh, batisha kabinu begina bak chatzi kav. Uchadiva Rabbi Akiva beit rov. We'll get into all those amounts in a minute, but the point is, a dinar is very little. If you say a dinar's worth of land, that's a very small piece of land that's not worth anything to the orphans. It's just worth a dinar, but the land in and of itself is not really worth much. What we mean, if she takes, according to Rashbag, if she took the amount extra that could be considered a small field that's worth something, or a small garden that's worth something. So in a field, it would be 9 kav's worth of planted stuff. And in a gina, it would be half a kav's worth, because a gina is much smaller, a garden. So even a small garden is worth something. It would have to be that amount. And according to Rabbi Akiva, beit rova, meaning a quarter of a kav instead of half a kav, that's considered significant enough that she took stuff that wasn't hers and she can't just give them the money back for it. But if it was only a kav, she could just return the money. A dinar, she could just return the money, and that's fine. So the sale would be a good sale. Again, only according to Rashbag. Haytak tshubata arba meot zuz. What if her ketuba was 400 zuz? Umachara lezeh b'maneh ulezeh b'maneh ulacharon yafeh maneh v'dinar b'maneh. It's a little sounds complicated. It's not very complicated. She took different plots of land and sold them each to 4 different people. So she sold the first a plot of 100 for 100, second a plot of 100, third a plot of 100. The fourth one, she took 100, which was what was left, but she took land that was worth 100 and a dinar. So now we already know, according to Tanakama, it's canceled, the sale. But which sale is canceled? Only shel acharon batel. Only the last sale is canceled because all the others were individual, right? They were separate from each other. Shel kulam, but the others, mechan kayam. The sale was a good sale. So now the Gemara asks, Mishna shaveh matayim b'maneh da'amrila ataf sadit. What's the difference between the case of if she sold the 200 field for 100, where we say it's your loss, to the woman, why can't she say then, if she sold it for double the amount, I won out? Really, I only got 100 of my ketuba because I only took 100 of the husband's property. The fact that I was able to sell it for double, I should gain the extra. So Amar Rav Nachman, Amar Rav Avua, moving now to Amar Bet. Kan Shana Rebbe wanted to teach us. Rebbe is Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, who put together the Mishna. By putting this case in the Mishna, he wanted to teach us the following thing, which has to do with messenger in general. The woman is the messenger of the orphans. Really, they should have sold the land and paid her the ketuba. Instead, she did it herself, which is really acting on their behalf. So what is Rebbe telling you? Hakol lebal hamaot. Everything goes to the person who's the owner of the money. Okay, in this case, it's the orphans. Any gains go to them. Kiditanya, as we see in the following braita, hosifu lo achat yitera, hakol lashaliach. Okay, if I send someone to go buy something for me in the shuk, and they get extra, okay? So for the price that I gave them, right, I said, go buy for 100 shekel, X amount of stuff, and they come back with extra. Hakol lashaliach. According to Tanakama, the shaliach gets everything, okay? If this is a case where, let's say, you go to a storekeeper and they like you, so they give you extra. So the Tanakama says, okay, you got extra. It's his gain. Tanakama is not the important opinion for us right now. Divrei, and it's Divrei Rabbi Yehuda. It's actually Rabbi Yehuda. That's not Rabbi Yehuda Nasi. Don't confuse. Rabbi Yossi Omer, Chokim, right? That's Rabbi Yehuda but Rabbi Eli. Rabbi Yossi says, Chokim, they split it 50-50. Because either, right, it's classic Mamon Mutaba Safek, we don't know what to do with it. Or maybe we say they're both responsible because the Shaliach maybe, had a nice smile and the owner liked him and gave him some extra. But if the person hadn't sent him, he never would have, right? He had to have had money to go there. So that came from the Shalach, and maybe they're both kind of responsible for it, which is why Chokim. To which, so far this doesn't prove anything yet. So wait, because we're trying to look for Hakol L'Ba'al Ma'od, which means the one who sent him should get all the gains. Well, the Hatanya, doesn't it say in a Braita, Rabbi Yossi Omer Hakol L'Ba'al Ma'od? They now quote Rabbi Yossi as saying, the owner of the money, right, the owner who sent him gets everything. So it's an obvious contradiction between Rabbi Yossi and the Braita and Rabbi Yossi and the other Braita. So Amar Rami bar Chama lo kasha. Rami bar Chama says, I have an answer. Kam b'davar sheyesh lo kitzba, kam b'davar she'en lo kitzba. If it has a set amount and we know exactly what the price is, then cholkim. But kam b'davar she'en lo kitzba, if it doesn't have a set amount, like the land, where it never really has a set amount, we all know that. So therefore, since there's no set price, if ein lo kitzba, we're going to say, okay, maybe the gain was just, you got extra, but maybe the extra was really because that was really the real price. And we don't really know what the real price was, which means that any gain is going to go back to the person whose money it was who sent the messenger to sell it or buy it for him. So therefore, it doesn't matter sell or buy, either which way. There's a gain here, in whatever direction it is. And that gain, if it's not anything with a set amount, goes to the person who had the money. And therefore, in our case, it's the orphans who own the money, and that's why they get the proceeds. So basically, they're saying by Rabbi Yehuda Nasi putting this in the Mishnah, he wanted to tell you that when a messenger goes, right, that he holds basically like this opinion of Rabbi Yossi and the way Rami bar Chama explained it, which is in the event that it's something that there's no set price, any gains go to the original owner. To which Rav Papa says, Amar Rav Papa Hilchata, in fact, the halacha is like this. Davar sheyesh lo kitzba cholkim, davar she'en lo kitzba hakol leba'al ha'ma'ot. So if it has a set amount, we split it 50-50. If there's extra. If it doesn't have a set amount, then it goes to the owner. My kamashmalan, why do you need to tell us this? We have a general principle that when Rabbi Yossi disagrees with Rabbi Yehuda, we always hold like Rabbi Yossi. So obviously we hold like Rabbi Yossi. What you're telling us we hold like Rabbi Yossi, we could have figured that out on our own. To which the Gemara says, Shinuya, Dishanin and Shinuyahu. They wanted to tell us is that Rami bar Chama, what Rav Papa was telling us by telling us this is the halacha, he was telling us that he explains the sugya the way Rami bar Chama explained the contradiction. And that's what he was trying to tell you. He holds that we hold this way because the Rami bar Chama was right in how he understood the opinion of Rabbi Yossi. Because without his explanation, Rabbi Yossi maybe could be explained in some other way. Okay, last part for today. Ibailu. Question is asked about messengers, not about our topic. Then the Gemara is going to first bring a Mishna from Meila to try to prove it. Then when they don't succeed in that, they're going to bring our Mishna to try to prove it. So Ibailu. Here's the question. Amarle. If he says to a shaliach, Zaben li litka, go sell a letech of my land, which is half of a kor. Kor is a big amount of land, 75,000 square amot. He says, Azav Zaben like kor. He says, sell me half of that amount. And the guy goes, the messenger, and he sells the entire kor, a whole big amount, not half the amount, but a kor's worth. How do we view this sale? Mosif al dvaravu, is he just adding on to what he was sent to do? Vilitka miakane, which would mean then, if he was only adding, that means we split his purchase into two. The part I asked him, let's say I asked the messenger to sell it. The first part he sold, I asked him to do it. So that works. Second part he sold, I didn't ask, so that part of the sale is no good. So I sold that to you. Then you would have to return me half of the land, but not the other half. O Dilma, or perhaps Ma'avir Dvaravu. He didn't listen to me. Belitkanami Lokani, which means he went against what I told him to do, which means his shlichut is canceled entirely. I can go back to you and say, give me my field back, because I never meant to sell you the whole thing, which means he totally messed up. Even the part that he did that I told him to do, that's no good. So let's learn it from here. Tashma. Amar Baal Habayit l'shlucha. The Baal Habayit says to Shaliach, Ten lahem chaticha le'orchim. Let's go give a piece of this meat to the guests. V'hu omer tzlu shtayim. And he says, take two. Okay, meaning the Shaliach didn't say what I said. I just want to check one thing. It's actually, I don't think it's a Mishnah. The Mishnah, we're going to quote in a minute. The Mishnah explains this, but I think this is not a Mishnah. Oh no, it is a Mishnah. Okay, stand corrected. It's a Mishnah. So now let's go. First, let's go back and explain what Meila is. Meila is misuse of consecrated property. That means, but it's always bishkad. I didn't know that I was using consecrated property. I had no idea that it was consecrated. So I go tell my messenger, go tell these people to eat this meat. Give them each a piece. He goes ahead and gives them 2 pieces. And then shalosh. When he gave them to the people, he put out this nice spread and said, everybody take 2 pieces. They each took 3. So now we have me. I did something wrong because I gave you consecrated property. The shaliach did something wrong because he gave you more than what I told you to eat. And they did something wrong because they took what they shouldn't have eaten. Now, we're going to skip a few lines first and read also what it says in the Mishna. In a few lines it says, because you can't understand this without this. Hashaliach she'asa shlichuto bal habayit ma'al, lo asa shlichuto shaliach ma'al. This shaliach went and did what I told him to do. Now, in general, if a shaliach, let's say I tell a shaliach to do something for me, and involved in the action I asked him to do is misuse of consecrated property, whose fault is it? His fault or my fault? Now remember, it's different than if I tell him to steal and he steals. So, right? He decided he was going to steal. He knew it was forbidden to steal. Here it was all accidental. So if the shaliach, the rule of thumb is the shaliach is doing what I sent the shaliach to do, then it's my fault. The Meila is on me. If he didn't do what I asked him to do, then it's his fault, not my fault. So in this case, what's going to happen? Well, it depends how you view this. So what does the Mishna say? Kulan ma'alu. Everybody was moel, meaning I was moel because I gave everyone one piece. So the first piece those people ate was on me because I sent the shaliach to tell them to do it. The second piece of meat they ate was on the shaliach because the shaliach told them. The third piece of meat they ate was on them because nobody told them they could take it. So Iyamar, now this all works if you hold. Iyamar bishlama mosif al dvarav have, that he's adding then mishum hachi ba'al habayit ma'al. Then each part is considered separately. He did part of what I asked him, he just doubled what he was giving. But Iyamar ma'avir al dvarav have, and then if you say everything I did is canceled, the messenger does is canceled because he didn't do what I said, then ba'al habayit ma'al, then I shouldn't be responsible. The whole 2 pieces he told them to take should be all on him. And as they says, v'hatnan. Now we'll read it again. And if he does a shlichut ba'al habayit ma'al, then it's not his fault. Lo asa shlichuto, then the shaliach ma'al. To which the Gemara says, can't prove it from there. Okay, in other words, and then we would prove that part of the sale of the original, the letech, should be valid. So hacha b'mayaskin, they say, no. It's a little bit different than that. This must be a case where de'amarlu shlu echat mida'ato shebal habayit ve'echat mida'ati. The shaliach himself split. It wasn't like he said, I told you to take. He was telling the people that Michelle told me that I could give you 2 pieces. No, he said the following. Echat mida'at ba'al habayit ve'echat mida'ati. Said, take 2 pieces. One, the owner of the house told you to take, and one on me. So that's why they're each responsible. But this doesn't tell you anything about a case where he claims, he was doing it as if he was my messenger, but doing more than what I told him to do. Right? The shaklu inu tlat, and then they decided on their own to take 3. Second attempt to get to an answer to our question. Tashma, haytak ketubot maneh, umachra shaveh maneh, v'dinar b'maneh, michra batel. What did it say? My ketuba is a maneh, and I sold shaveh maneh and dinar. I took something that was 101 dinars, and I sold it for 100. It's no good. My love. Now, they're going to explain like this. They're going to explain it a little differently than we did. Is it not dezavin shaveh maneh v'dinar b'maneh v'dinar? Isn't it that she sold the shaveh maneh and a dinar. She took 101 and she sold it for 101. Ubimai maneh. What does it mean, bim maneh? We thought it meant for 100. No, she sold 101 for 101. Umay afilu. What does it say? Afilu. Afilu, right? What's the afilu? In the Mishna it says, afilu hi omeret achzir dinar liyorshim. Even if I'll return a dinar to the yorshim, afilu hi omeret achzir et hadinar liyorshim. Right? We thought it meant she'll say, I'll keep 99 and I'll give you one of the dinarim since I took an extra dinar from you. But now they said, no. What it means is I'll keep my 100 and I sold 101 for 101, so I'll give you back the extra that's yours. And then what would you see here, right? Bedina makarke, so she'll give it back to them for the dinar that she sold it for. V'katani michra batel. So what do you see here? The whole thing is invalid, even though theoretically we could split it, right? She sold one extra, and then that extra, she can't just return that to them. The whole thing is no good. So that would seem to imply that it's not osufe, right? It's not that they're adding. it's mavir al dvarav. The whole thing, as soon as you take too much, that's the end of it. To which Amar Rav Huna b'rei Rav Natan lo bida ozil. No. The problem here is not particularly that she took a little more. It's that she sold it only for a maneh. She took more land than she was deserving of, and she sold it for the maneh that she was deserving of. And that's the problem. And then we go back to the original understanding that she sold a shavet maneh v'dinar for a maneh. And then even if she returns the one to them, that's the case, in which case it shows that there was one sale, which is really a sale of 100. You can't start splitting it and saying it was a sale of 100 and then a sale of 1. So therefore, it doesn't teach you anything about the case we're trying to find. With that, we'll end our daf for today. We'll continue on with the sugya tomorrow. Again, moedim l'simcha to everybody.